I've been sitting in the same chair every morning. For longer than I can remember. By the window. Facing the street. I don't know when it became a habit. It just happened. Some days. I don't even sit right away. I stand there with my hand on the back of the chair. As if checking that it's still mine. The view hasn't changed much. A quiet road. One old tree. The sky doing whatever it wants that day. But I have changed. I can see that now. The chair knows it too. The cushion has shaped itself around me. Like it remembers things. I pretend I've forgotten. That chair has heard more of my life than most people ever did. And lately, I've started to wonder, what will happen to it when I stop sitting there? After I said that out loud, the room felt quieter somehow. Not empty. Just listening. I stayed seated for a while. Hands resting on my knees. Breathing steady. Letting the moment pass the way moments do when no one rushes them. I've lived in this house a long time. Long enough to know how it sounds at night. The soft tick of the clock in the hallway. The refrigerator humming like it's thinking about something important. The floorboard near the window that always complains when the temperature changes. These sounds used to annoy me. Now, they feel familiar. Almost comforting. I stood up slowly and walked toward the shelf by the wall. Old photographs lined the top. Not arranged neatly. Just placed where my hands had stopped years ago. There I was in one picture. Younger. Standing beside someone who looked at me like I was home. Funny thing about photos. They don't tell you what happened next. They only prove that, once, something mattered enough to be remembered. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame. Didn't pick it up. Didn't need to. Some memories don't ask to be held. They just want to be noticed. I made my way back to the chair and sat down again. Outside, the sky was starting to dim. That quiet blue that shows up before night fully settles in. I realized then that I wasn't tired. Not really. Just reflective. The kind of tired that comes from thinking about where you've been. And how you ended up exactly where you are. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a moment. And let the house breathe around me. Whatever this was. This feeling. This pause. It didn't feel like the beginning of something big. It felt like the middle. And somehow, that felt just right. I opened my eyes and noticed the light had changed. Evening had crept in while I wasn't looking. It does that sometimes. Slips in quietly. Like it doesn't want to interrupt your thoughts. The lamp by the chair was still off. I left it that way. There was enough light left to sit with myself a little longer. I thought about the years that passed without announcement. No grand exits. No dramatic arrivals. Just days stacking on top of each other. Until one day you look around and realize. You've built a life without noticing the exact moment it happened. I used to measure time differently. In deadlines. In paydays. In things that needed fixing. Now I measure it in smaller ways. How long the tea stays warm. How early the birds start talking in the morning. How quiet the evenings feel when the world finally slows down. I reached for the side table and picked up the glasses I didn't put on anymore. Held them for a second. Then set them back down. No rush. There's a freedom in that. Not having to hurry for anyone. Not having to explain why you've paused. The truth is, most of my life was spent moving forward. Always the next thing. The next responsibility. The next version of myself I thought I needed to become. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking where I was going, and started paying attention to where I was standing. That's when things got quieter. And clearer. I exhaled slowly and smiled to myself. Not because something special had happened, but because nothing needed to. Outside, the first porch light flickered on down the street. Night was settling in. And for the first time that day, I felt completely present. Not waiting. Not remembering too hard. Just here. And that, I've learned, is more than enough. The house made its usual sounds as night settled in. A soft creak from the hallway. The faint tick of the clock in the other room. Even the refrigerator humming like it was clearing its throat. These sounds used to annoy me. I wanted silence back then. Real silence. The kind you think means peace. But silence isn't empty. It's full of things you forgot to listen to. I leaned back in the chair and let the noise exist. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't try to name it. There was a time when evenings felt heavy. When sitting still meant thinking too much. When quiet made space for worries I didn't invite. Now, it feels different. Now, the quiet feels earned. I've outlived a lot of noise. Arguments that didn't matter. Plans that never happened. Versions of myself I thought I had to protect. Most of that faded on its own. I didn't chase it away. Life just carried it off eventually. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not to sleep. Just to rest in the feeling of being done for the day. There's comfort in knowing. Nothing else is required of you. No one expecting a call. No place you have to be. No decision waiting for an answer. Just a chair. A quiet room. And the steady rhythm of breathing. I opened my eyes again and glanced toward the doorway. The hallway was darker now. The edges softer. Night does that. It smooths things out. Takes the sharpness off the day. I thought about all the nights I rushed through. Treating them like something to survive. Instead of something to sit with. If I could tell my younger self one thing, it wouldn't be advice. It would be permission. Permission to slow down. Because the best moments, I'm learning, are the ones that don't ask for anything at all. I stayed there a while longer. Not checking the time. Not counting minutes like I used to. Time feels different now. Less like something chasing you. More like something walking beside you. I reached for the lamp and turned it off. The room softened instantly. Shadows stretched, then settled. In the dark, the house felt kinder. Like it wasn't asking me to explain myself. I thought about the people who once filled these rooms. Some left on purpose. Some drifted away. Some stayed longer than they should have. And some never really leave. They show up in small ways. A phrase you still use. A habit you never questioned. A memory that surfaces when you least expect it. I used to push those moments away. Told myself I was done looking back. But looking back isn't the same as going back. It's just noticing the road you walked. I pulled the blanket over my legs and exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that comes when you're finally safe. Not safe from danger. Safe from rushing. Outside, the world kept going. Headlights passed. Somewhere, someone was still awake, worrying. But in here, the night had made room for me. Tomorrow could wait. Whatever it brought would bring itself. Tonight wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't about remembering perfectly. Or forgetting completely. It was about being here. Exactly as I am. And for the first time in a long while. That felt like enough. I woke up before the alarm. That doesn't happen much anymore. Sleep usually holds on to me longer than I expect. But that morning, my eyes opened on their own. No panic. No rush. Just awareness. The light coming through the curtains was thin and pale. Early light. The kind that hasn't decided what kind of day it's going to be yet. I stayed still for a moment, listening. The refrigerator humming. A bird somewhere outside, clearing its throat. The house was awake with me. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there longer than necessary. Not tired. Just present. In the bathroom mirror, I caught my reflection again. Same face as last night. Same lines. Same quiet eyes. Funny thing is, some mornings you recognize yourself. Other mornings, you don't. This one felt familiar. I made coffee the slow way. Measured the grounds by feel, not by scoop. Let the kettle sing instead of rushing it. While it brewed, my mind wandered. Not forward. But sideways. To moments that didn't ask for attention. Mornings like this one, years ago. Different house. Different version of me. Back then, mornings meant plans. Deadlines. Responsibilities stacked neatly in my head. Now, mornings just mean space. I carried the mug to the window and stood there, warming my hands. The street looked ordinary. Parked cars. A trash bin tipped slightly to one side. Nothing special. And somehow, that felt right. For the first time in a long while. The day didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could simply walk into. I took my coffee outside. The air had a chill to it. Not cold enough to bite. Just enough to remind you that the day was real. I sat on the front step and watched the neighborhood stretch awake. A porch light clicked off down the street. Someone started a car and let it idle longer than needed. Small signs of life. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. I used to think mornings were meant for getting ahead. Beating traffic. Beating time. Now I see them differently. Mornings aren't about winning anything. They're about arriving. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle in my chest. The coffee tasted the same as always. But I didn't rush it this time. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez opened her curtains. She waved when she saw me. We don't talk much. Never have. But we recognize each other. That counts for something. I nodded back, holding my mug like a small salute. She smiled and disappeared inside. Funny how connection doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's just knowing someone else is there. When I finished the coffee, I didn't go back inside right away. I stayed seated, listening to the day gather itself. A breeze moved through the trees. Leaves whispered overhead. I thought about how many mornings I'd missed like this. Too busy. Too focused on what came next. You don't realize what you're skipping until time slows you down. And time does that, eventually. One way or another. I stood up carefully, joints reminding me of their presence. And smiled to myself. This pace. This quiet unfolding. Felt earned. I hadn't rushed my way here. Life had carried me, step by step. And for once, I wasn't trying to get anywhere else. Back inside, the house felt warmer. Not in temperature. In memory. I set the mug in the sink and ran water over it, watching the steam rise. Simple motion. Familiar rhythm. There was a time when this house was louder. Footsteps moving in different directions. Voices overlapping. Doors opening and closing without much thought. Now, every sound stood alone. I didn't mind that. Silence gets a bad reputation. People think it means something is missing. Sometimes it just means nothing is demanding you. I walked through the living room, straightening a cushion that didn't need it. Old habit. Hard to let go of. On the bookshelf, my hand paused on a photo frame. Faded edges. Faces younger than the ones I remember seeing in the mirror. I picked it up and studied it longer than I usually do. Not searching for anything. Just noticing. That version of me didn't know what was coming. Didn't know what would stay. What would leave. He looked confident, though. Or maybe just unaware. I set the frame back down carefully, like it might bruise. Some memories need gentle handling. I moved toward the hallway, stopping at the doorway of a room I rarely enter anymore. The door was open. It always is. Inside, dust floated in the light from the window. The room smelled like cardboard and time. I stood there, not stepping in yet. Certain spaces carry weight. Not heavy weight. Honest weight. The kind that reminds you who you were. And who you aren't anymore. I took a breath and stepped inside. Not to change anything. Not to dig. Just to acknowledge that the room existed. That it had held parts of my life. And that I had lived through them. The room hadn't changed much. A desk pushed against the wall. A chair tucked in, slightly crooked. Boxes stacked neatly, like they were waiting for instructions. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk. Dust clung to my skin, soft and gray. Funny how time leaves fingerprints everywhere. I pulled the chair back and sat down, feeling it creak beneath me. The sound made me smile. Some things complain when you use them. It doesn't mean they don't want to be used. One of the boxes sat open. Inside were papers I'd forgotten how to organize. Notes. Receipts. Old envelopes. Not memories exactly. More like evidence. Proof that I'd lived a full life, even on the days that felt ordinary. I picked up a notebook and flipped through it. Blank pages outnumbered the written ones. That felt right. There's something comforting about unused space. It means possibility didn't run out. I closed the notebook and set it aside. This room wasn't asking me to sort through the past. It wasn't demanding closure. It was just holding things. And maybe that was enough. I stood and pushed the chair back in. No need to rush. No need to decide anything today. At the doorway, I paused and looked back once more. The light had shifted, softer now. The room seemed smaller. Or maybe I had learned how to carry it better. I reached out and turned the knob gently, not closing the door. Just easing it toward the frame. Some parts of life don't need to be shut away. They just need to rest. By the time I stepped back into the hallway, the house had settled into itself again. No expectations. No reminders. Just space. I moved slowly, letting my steps decide the pace instead of my thoughts. The floor felt cool beneath my feet. Solid. Reliable. In the kitchen, the clock ticked quietly. Not loud enough to hurry me. Just enough to be noticed. I checked it out of habit, then laughed softly at myself. Old reflex. There was nowhere I needed to be. I opened the back door and let fresh air drift inside. The smell of grass and distant morning mixed with the warmth of the house. This was the part of the day I used to skip. Too busy moving on to the next thing. Now it felt like the day's beginning, and its permission to move slowly. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to rest. Just to feel. There's a difference. I thought about how many chapters a life has. How some close loudly. Some fade quietly. And some don't really end at all. They just change shape. This chapter, whatever it was, didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a pause. A place to breathe. To notice what was still here. I opened my eyes and smiled, faint but genuine. Maybe that's what mornings are for now. Not to push forward. But to check in. To ask yourself one simple question. Am I listening? And for the first time in a long time, the answer felt easy. Yes. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. That alone caught my attention. Most calls these days are silent. Numbers without names. Voices that hang up before you can answer. This one didn't. It rang again. Steady. Patient. I picked it up on the third ring. Hello? I said, unsure who I was expecting. There was a pause on the other end. Not the kind filled with static. The kind filled with breath. Then a voice spoke. Not rushed. Not loud. Familiar. It took me a second to place it. And when I did, my hand tightened around the receiver. It was someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Not because of anger. Not because of distance. Just time. Time has a way of stretching space between people, until it feels impolite to close it again. We exchanged names we both already knew. Laughed softly at how strange that felt. The conversation moved slowly, carefully, like we were both afraid to step on something fragile. They asked how I was doing. I gave the honest answer. The one I don't always say out loud. "I'm alright," I said. And I meant it. We talked about ordinary things. The weather. The neighborhood. How quiet everything seemed lately. Underneath it all, something else lingered. Unspoken. Waiting. I leaned against the counter, listening more than speaking. Some voices carry history in them. You can hear it between the words. When the call ended, I stayed where I was. Receiver still in my hand. The kitchen felt different now. Charged. Alive. Some conversations don't change your plans. They change your posture. And that one had done exactly that. I set the phone back in its place. Slowly. Like it might ring again if I startled it. The room felt quieter than before. Not empty. Expectant. I walked to the window and stood there, letting the afternoon light fall where it wanted. Shadows stretched across the floor, longer now, more deliberate. That voice had stirred something I hadn't planned on touching. Not sadness. Not regret. Recognition. It's strange how certain people remain familiar. Even after years of silence. Like a melody you haven't heard in decades. But somehow still know by heart. I replayed the conversation in my head, not word for word. Just the feeling of it. The pauses. The careful tone. The way neither of us rushed to hang up. We hadn't talked about the past. Not directly. But it sat there with us. Quiet and patient. Like it always had. I thought about all the conversations that never happened. The ones delayed by pride. By busyness. By the assumption that there would always be more time. Life doesn't announce its last chances. It just grows quieter. I moved away from the window and sat at the table. Ran my thumb along the edge, worn smooth by years of use. Some connections don't fade. They just wait. Wait for the right moment. The right version of you. The phone didn't ring again. But the silence felt different now. Fuller. Like the day had shifted course slightly. Not enough to notice at first. But enough to matter. And as the afternoon settled into evening, I realized something simple. And unexpectedly comforting. Some doors don't need to be reopened. They just need to be remembered. Evening arrived without ceremony. The light softened, turning the room a gentler shade of gold. I didn't switch on the lamp right away. Some moments ask to be left alone. I made myself a cup of tea, the slow way. Waiting for the water to boil. Listening to it rise, then settle. Small rituals have a way of grounding you. Especially when thoughts begin to wander. I sat by the window again, cup warming my hands. Watching the day loosen its grip. People talk about closure as if it's a final thing. A sentence with a period at the end. But life rarely works that way. Sometimes closure is just understanding. That not everything needs an explanation. Not every silence is unfinished business. I thought about how much I'd changed. And how much I hadn't. The years leave their marks quietly. In the way you speak. In what you no longer chase. In the things you learn to accept without argument. I realized I wasn't waiting for another call. I wasn't hoping for anything more. That conversation hadn't reopened a wound. It had reminded me that it had healed. The tea cooled slowly, forgotten for a moment. Outside, the first lights came on in nearby homes. Lives unfolding. Evenings beginning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt settled in my own quiet. Not lonely. Not restless. Just present. Some days don't change your life. They simply return it to you. And that, I thought, was enough. I used to think mornings were supposed to feel fresh. Like something new was waiting. Like the day arrived carrying answers. But most mornings don't do that. They come quietly, without promise. This one did too. I woke before the alarm, the room still dim. That soft hour where the world hasn't decided what it's going to be yet. For a moment, I stayed still. Listening to my own breathing. Letting the day approach instead of chasing it. There was a time when waking up meant urgency. Plans. Deadlines. The constant sense of being behind. Now, it mostly means noticing. The way light finds the edge of the curtain. The distant sound of someone starting their day. The quiet relief of having nowhere urgent to be. I sat up slowly, joints reminding me of their presence. Age doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers, consistently. I went to the kitchen, opened the window a little. Cool air drifted in, carrying the smell of morning. I didn't turn on the radio. Silence felt more honest. As I poured coffee, I thought about how life changes pace without asking permission. One day you're running toward something. Another day, you're simply standing still, looking around. And neither is wrong. We spend so much time trying to return to who we were, that we forget to meet who we've become. I carried my cup back to the table and sat down, watching the steam rise. This wasn't a beginning. It wasn't an ending either. It was a pause. And sometimes, a pause is exactly what the soul has been asking for. I stayed at the table longer than necessary. Not because I was tired, but because leaving felt like ending something I hadn't finished thinking about. The coffee cooled. I didn't mind. There was a time when I couldn't sit like this. Stillness used to make me restless. It felt unproductive, almost uncomfortable. Now, stillness feels earned. I looked around the room, at the small things that had gathered around me over the years. The chair with the loose leg I never fixed. The photo frame turned slightly away from the light. Objects that had quietly stayed, even when people didn't. They don't ask questions. They don't expect explanations. They just remain. I thought about how much of life is spent preparing for what comes next. Next week, next year, next version of ourselves. But lately, I've been more interested in what's already here. The memories that arrive without warning. The feelings that don't need to be named. The peace that shows up when you stop asking it to. I finished the coffee and stood up slowly. The day had begun without ceremony. Outside, a bird landed on the wire and stayed there, unmoving, as if waiting for nothing in particular. I watched it for a moment longer than I should have. Then I realized something simple. Life doesn't always move forward. Sometimes it settles. And in that settling, there is a quiet kind of grace. By afternoon, the light had shifted. It came in softer now, stretching longer across the floor, touching corners the morning never reached. I noticed it the way you notice someone you've known a long time. Without surprise, but with appreciation. I sat near the window and let the quiet stay with me. There was a period in my life when silence felt empty. I filled it with noise, conversations, obligations, plans, anything to avoid hearing my own thoughts. Now, silence feels full. It carries memories gently, without pushing them forward. It allows space for regret without demanding explanation. It makes room for gratitude, even when it arrives quietly. I thought about the people who once knew me in different versions of myself. The one who rushed. The one who worried. The one who thought time was something to fight. They aren't gone. They've just softened. Age doesn't erase who we were. It smooths the edges. I rested my hands on my knees and breathed slowly, the way the doctor once suggested. Not for health, but for calm. Outside, someone walked past, talking on the phone, laughing loudly. Their voice faded quickly, swallowed by distance. And that felt right. Not everything needs to stay. Some moments are meant to pass through, leaving behind only the feeling that life is moving, even when we are still. As evening approached, I felt no urgency. No list waiting to be checked. No future demanding attention. Just this quiet afternoon, settling into something gentler. And for once, that was enough. As the sun lowered, the room changed again. Shadows grew longer, softer, like they were stretching before rest. The air cooled just enough to remind me that the day was letting go. I stood up slowly, not because I needed to, but because my body asked for movement. There was a time when I ignored those small requests. Now, I listen. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of warm tea. No rush. No distraction. Just the sound of liquid meeting the cup. The faint steam rising like a quiet thought. I carried it back to my chair and sat down as the first evening light appeared. That hour between day and night has always felt honest to me. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. I thought about how much of life is lived in between. Between decisions. Between arrivals and goodbyes. Between who we were and who we become. We rarely notice those moments when they happen. Only later do we realize they held everything. I sipped the tea slowly, letting the warmth settle. My breathing followed its own gentle rhythm. Outside, a bird settled somewhere unseen. A car passed in the distance. Then nothing. The world didn't disappear. It simply quieted. And in that quiet, I felt present. Not waiting. Not remembering too much. Just here. There was comfort in knowing the evening would continue without my attention. That night would arrive whether I watched or not. For the first time that day, I smiled, not because something happened, but because nothing needed to. Night arrived without announcement. No sudden darkness. No clear moment to point at. Just a gradual softening, until the room belonged more to shadows than light. I turned on a small lamp beside my chair. Its glow stayed close, as if it respected the quiet. I've learned that not everything needs to be fully lit. I looked around the room again. The same walls. The same furniture. But they felt different now, less like objects, more like companions that had aged alongside me. I thought about all the nights I once tried to fill. With noise. With plans. With the need to feel important. Now, I let the night be empty if it wanted to be. The clock ticked softly, marking time without urgency. Each second passed, then let go. No pressure to hold on to it. I rested my hands on my knees and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to sleep. Just to listen. To my breath. To the stillness. To the sense that everything I needed had already arrived. Somewhere deep inside, a thought surfaced, not loud, not demanding. Just gentle. Morning doesn't wake me the way it used to. There was a time when mornings arrived with urgency, alarms, schedules, a list already waiting before my feet touched the floor. Now, they come quietly. Light slipped through the curtains before I opened my eyes. Not bright. Not demanding. Just enough to remind me the world was still here. I stayed still for a moment, listening. No traffic yet. No voices. Just the soft sound of my own breathing and a bird somewhere nearby, practicing its song. I sat up slowly, letting the day come to me instead of chasing it. The floor was cool beneath my feet. I liked that feeling. It made me aware of where I was, of the simple fact that I had arrived here, to this morning, to this version of myself. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside just a little. The street looked unchanged. Houses standing quietly, as if they too were waking up at their own pace. I thought about how many mornings I once rushed through without noticing them. How often I treated time like something to outrun instead of something to live inside. Now, I let the kettle take its time. I let the steam rise slowly. I let my thoughts wander without trying to organize them. There was no grand plan for the day. And strangely, that felt like freedom. I realized then that this chapter of my life wasn't about doing more. It was about being present for what was already here. And as I held the warm cup in my hands, watching the morning settle gently into place, I understood. This wasn't an ending. It was a quieter beginning. I carried my cup to the chair near the window, the one that had slowly become my favorite place in the house. Not because it was comfortable, but because it asked nothing of me. I sat there while the morning unfolded, minute by minute, as if time itself had decided to walk instead of run. The tea warmed my hands first. Then, slowly, it warmed something deeper. I watched a neighbor step outside, keys in hand, already moving with purpose. There was a time I would have felt the pull of that rhythm, the need to match pace, to be somewhere, to prove I was still useful. But now, I simply watched. I thought about the years behind me, not with regret, but with a kind of gentle curiosity. How many versions of myself had existed before this one? How many mornings had shaped me without my noticing? Some days were loud with memory. Others passed quietly, like this one, leaving only a soft impression behind. I realized that slowing down hadn't made my world smaller. If anything, it had made it clearer. I noticed things now. The way light shifted across the wall. The faint creak of the house settling. The comfort of repetition. I finished my tea and didn't rush to refill it. There was no need to fill every moment anymore. Instead, I sat with the silence, letting it stretch without feeling empty. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for the day to begin. It already had. And I was already inside it. Later, I stepped outside for a short walk, not far, just enough to feel the air change around me. The street was quiet in the way only late mornings can be. Not asleep. Just unhurried. Each step felt deliberate, not because I was careful, but because I no longer rushed through spaces as if they were obstacles. I passed houses I'd walked by hundreds of times before, yet they felt different today. Not new, just noticed. A garden gate stood slightly open. Wind chimes moved gently, creating sound without insisting on being heard. Somewhere, a radio played softly, its music floating through an open window. I realized I used to think stillness meant stopping. Now I understood, it meant arriving. I paused at the corner and rested my hand on the low stone wall. The cool surface grounded me in a way schedules never had. I wasn't thinking about the past or planning the rest of the day. I was simply here, breathing in a moment that didn't need improvement. People passed by, brief nods, quiet acknowledgement. No conversations, no explanations. That felt right. As I turned back toward home, I noticed something unexpected. I felt lighter, not because anything had been resolved, but because nothing needed to be. Life hadn't slowed down for me. I had slowed down for it. And in doing so, I finally heard what it had been saying all along. Back inside, the house welcomed me the way it always had, quietly, without ceremony. I set my keys down in the same place I always did. Some habits stay, even when everything else shifts. Sunlight moved slowly across the floor, tracing a path I'd never paid attention to before. It reminded me that time doesn't rush. We do. I sat in my chair, not to rest, but to listen. Not for sounds, exactly. For that feeling of being present without needing to explain myself to anyone. There was a moment, years ago, when I believed life was something to keep up with. That if I slowed down, I'd fall behind. Now I knew better. Nothing important had ever been lost because I took my time. But plenty had slipped away when I didn't. I thought about the versions of myself I used to carry around. The one who hurried. The one who worried. The one who believed worth came from being needed. They had done their job. And I was grateful. But they didn't need to speak for me anymore. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt full, like a room finally cleared of noise so you can hear your own breath. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the stillness settle. No tension. No anticipation. Just enough peace to know I was exactly where I was meant to be. And that was more than enough. That night, I didn't do anything special. No lists. No plans for tomorrow. No quiet promises to be better or faster or more prepared. I simply let the day end. The lights were dim. The clock ticked softly, like it knew not to interrupt. Outside, the world carried on without needing my attention. I realized something then. Life doesn't always ask for action. Sometimes, it just asks us to notice. To notice the weight of the chair beneath us. The steady rhythm of our breath. The way peace arrives when we stop chasing it. There were years when I filled every silence. With noise. With effort. With explanations no one had asked for. Now, silence felt like an old friend who didn't need entertaining. I stood by the window one last time before bed. The street was quiet. A single light glowed somewhere down the road. It was enough. I turned away, not because I was done looking, but because I knew it would still be there tomorrow. Some things don't disappear when you rest. They wait. I lay down slowly, letting the day loosen its grip. No regrets followed me into the dark. No worries asked to come along. Just the calm certainty that I had lived this day honestly. At my own pace. In my own time. And as sleep found me, gently and without effort, I understood something simple and true. Not every story needs a dramatic ending.